The other one we looked at was, in terms of putting a dot on the map, the Cox Convention Center site itself, in terms of potential redevelopment of that. Could that accommodate the transit function on this site? Transit accommodation is low because we would have to jump across Gaylord, maybe bridge across and have platforms here, the other facilities on the other side of the street. Could be solved, but it might be complicated. Could have a good civic presence if the entire block is redeveloped. Economic development, we were concerned about the feasibility of that in terms of how this might really redevelop. But auto and pedestrian access was good in terms of it being along Gaylord and having good pedestrian connectivity around it. So it generally ranked neutral. We're calling this one parking lot in Bricktown north of Reno at the railroad. This is Reno, so we're looking at this general site here. Could be the parking lot, probably would take more space than that, so it might include some redevelopment of this block. Might even provide some connectivity under the tracks or across the track to the Santa Fe Depot. But this site, it generally ranked fairly high. It had fairly good transit accommodation, good civic presence because it does front on Reno. Economic development opportunity was good. It had excellent auto and pedestrian access from the north-south street as well as from Reno here. Now this is going to a site just across the street. Large parking lot here, undeveloped parcel, a lot of potential for redevelopment. Transit accommodation starts to drop a little bit because we're getting a little further away. You can see the right-of-way narrows here. So to accommodate all the rail modes, we'd probably have to widen out that right-of-way here at some expense, but move the Amtrak station down. But everything else ranked very high. Great civic presence. Will also be along the boulevard as it redevelops. I mean, this is the elevated I-40, which is coming down. So this will be essentially, it will dip, the boulevard will dip under the rail corridor here, come back up to grade about here at this intersection. So you've got good accessibility on both sides. Also has good automobile and pedestrian access. Number 7, OTE substation, which is essentially located across the rail corridor from there, just south of the boulevard. Essentially ranked very similar to Site 4, the Cox Convention Center, because you have to get across Gaylord, so it's separated a little bit from the rail corridor. Would require widening of the rail corridor to accommodate rail functions. Civic presence started to drop a little bit just because it's getting further from downtown. Would still have good presence along the boulevard though. Economic development starts to get a little lower because again you're getting out of that general pedestrian connectivity to downtown. That also ranks that way with the automobile and pedestrian access as well. The lumberyard site, which is essentially this part of the site here, just south of what will eventually be the boulevard. So we're jumping from this side of Gaylord across the tracks, if you will. Could also go into the cotton gin site down here if we needed to enlarge it. So everything ranked fairly good here other than automobile and pedestrian access, because in this case the only access would be from the boulevard, which is going to be depressed through this area and not back up to grade until you get about right here. So we're separated by the freight corridor here. We've got some access from the boulevard, but the rest of the way around it we don't have any access at all. So it gets a little bit hard to get to. Number 9 is Union Station, which we looked very closely at because it's a great building. It was originally built, it was Oklahoma City's transit facility. Unfortunately, it winds up being in the wrong location in terms of really accommodating that north-south rail corridor, which is where Amtrak is going to be. We know commuter rail is going to be following that in the future. High-speed rail is going to be following that in the future. And if you look at the large map, Doug, why don't you flip that up just so it's up there? We don't have it here, it's in the back. Okay, we can go back to that later. But it becomes too far off the corridor to really work well in terms of transit accommodation. We can bring all the other modes here. We'd have to extend streetcar a long ways down to this location. The other thing that's happened is with the purchase of the I-40 right-of-way being moved over to here, we've got very limited railroad right-of-way access in terms of expanding beyond the 2 tracks that are there to accommodate other rail modes in the future. So due to its location, it ranked fairly good in terms of civic presence and visibility if you consider it within the context of the Core Shore Plan. It kind of falls right in the middle of that. At some point, downtown may reach to it. But in the meantime, it's a little bit isolated. There is economic development opportunity as it relates to the Core Shore Plan in the future, but in the interim, automobile and pedestrian access in terms of that connectivity to downtown, really ranks fairly poor. So this one ranked actually one of the lower ranked sites in the outline. The next one is the pull-apart site. And Doug, maybe you can help me explain where this is. Here's the freight corridor.
There's the river.
The
river that we don't have to mow anymore.
Right. Doug, would you mind grabbing one of those, because I think we need to see it. Essentially, the reason we put this in here is that if you looked on the map earlier, that the high-speed rail corridor was coming up here, and one of the options was to take it to Tulsa by turning out at this location. There we go. Doug, can you show us where that site is? I think we need to put it back in context. There it is.
And I think the main gist here was trying to accommodate that high-speed rail.
Right.
The ability, this is the one site that catches high-speed rail before it potentially heads off to Tulsa. Now, again, why it ranks relatively low on all those civic presence, economic development, and auto pedestrian is it's so far disconnected from the core of downtown now. So in the future, that might be a great site, but right now, for the foreseeable future, it didn't rise to the level that some of the other sites did.
And we essentially put the dot on the map because if ODOT was to tell us that this is the only way they're going to make it to Tulsa, that essentially pushes the hub down here if we really want to make it integral with high-speed rail. Not that that's absolutely necessary, because we could connect, there's a high-speed rail station here, we still could connect it through rail, streetcar, bus to a hub up in this location. But our desire is to bring high-speed rail in the future through downtown and make the connection up here so it comes through the site. So we wanted to have one in there at least to test against that concept if we should find out that high-speed rail had to bypass downtown. But that's not our desire.
I think, Allan, we have done enough talking. Before we tell you what we think about what sites should move forward and what the advisory committee thought, maybe you all can talk to us a little bit about these 10 sites. Does anybody have any kind of, hey, you all missed something, or hey, we really like this? I know Phil had talked, and let me talk to him, Phil, and then we'll come back to you. Or Jerry, do you want to?
Space this thing's going to require.
The space requirements. You want to take that? I mean, that's where we are going next with our study. What we want to do here is take a 10,000-foot view and say, hey, if we were just looking at big picture, along these corridors, what are the best sites that we should be looking at? Now we're going to test the ones that rise to the highest level here. We're going to start testing them for size and their ability to capitalize on all the things that we want the hub to be.
And we're assuming that in some manner, even though we may have to massage the size of these bubbles, that we can accommodate the space in any of these sites.
Phil?
In all respect, I think I've been following the politics and development of rail for about 20 years. And what we've got to do, it seems to me, we've got to start back at the highest level. And if you're familiar with optimization, the concept of simulated annealing, so we've got to heat things up some more. And we've got to start top-down approach and see where a high-speed rail and then our local rail network is coming in. We have a high-speed rail paradigm that somehow, some way, I stumbled onto, I think is doing quite well. It's called Ice Pack, where we move 5 semis at a time at 150 miles an hour. And you probably know Joseph Borman's a friend of mine on the U.S. high-speed rail. Joseph and I have some disagreements, but I think I'm saying where California and Oklahoma can get together and joint research on a nationwide network. Well, we'd have a rail loop up at Jones, and we'll have one over at El Reno. And then out of Jones, we'd spin trains off, decelerate them. And I'd ask everybody, consider Fort Smith Junction. We're under-designing this. We're taking people into downtown where most people want to go someplace else in Oklahoma City. Let's just get them into our, what we call a MetNet system here in the city, and then they can catch another train downtown. Or if you want to bring high-speed rail out of Fort Smith Junction, we can bring special trains down here. But as far as this goes, I love 6, 7, and 8 because David Streb and I have got an ongoing feud with ODOT, but I guarantee there's no way we're going to stop up that as an express route where the Boulevard Parkway is. There's no way it's going to happen. We're going to have High speed, we're gonna have local net service right down there. I can see a station where Bass Pro is and one above Classen. And now I can see a station where your 6, 7, and 8 are. So you've got excellent flow into the rest of the city. Thanks.
Good comments. Thank you.